Good morning. It's a real pleasure, Sisa Ntshona, to have you giving me 10 minutes for an interview this morning. I know you're an incredibly busy person. I was really impressed by what you had to say on the panel at World Travel Market London, and I just wanted to catch up with you on a one-to-one and really ask you what you've learned about the management of tourism in the context of the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning, Harold. Wow, where does one start? I think the key message is that we're still learning, and that's part of the lesson. The environment is so fluid. There's new data points coming through all the time that one has to constantly keep on reinventing themselves and make sure they keep up with what's going on. And more importantly, is that the consumer behavior is also changing all the time because it is being formed by what's happening around them. So necessarily, what the consumer in this instance, I mean the tourist, what they would have wanted, pre COVID is very different from within a COVID environment. The priorities of things they want are fundamentally different. So therefore, as destinations, we have to be responsive to all of this and make sure that we can restack ourselves and make sure that we, fulfill the needs and wants of the tourist.
One of the advantages, it seems to me, that South Africa has had over some of the other countries, or most of the other countries in Africa, is you have been able to turn towards domestic tourism. And you and I both know that South Africa is an extraordinarily diverse place, not only culturally and ethnically, but also in terms of its physical habitats. And many South Africans have chosen to holiday abroad and now have to holiday in South Africa because international travel is difficult. Has that helped, do you think, with the maintenance of the tourism sector in South Africa?
Yeah, look, I mean, some business is better than no business. We've had to dig very, very hard. And again, here, part of the trick is that as a tourism body, we don't own any products. We don't own any delivery of any of them. So essentially, we don't set the price, we don't set the value proposition and offering and all of that. So there was a bit of an education element that we had to embark on with the industry itself to really kind of inform and educate them as to what is out there and also give them a sense in terms of how the recovery is going to be led, as it were. And we're very clear there's going to be an inside out, starting off with domestic tourism, then regional, then ultimately international. And that's all got to do with, the comfort levels of people wanting to travel, essentially. Ultimately, the laws of supply and demand come into effect, and if you price yourself out of the market, essentially, you won't get anyone coming through as well. So that was quite important. Then on the flip side, we also had to almost reignite the love of the country, the ability to explore the country in South Africans themselves. Those that you've highlighted typically would go overseas to say, well, listen, global travel right now is really not at optimum level. Consider traveling locally. And suddenly some of the attractions, some of the products that were previously not accessible to locals has suddenly now become accessible. And there lies in, kind of the tight balance. And the products are always kind of aware to say, well, listen, we have to adjust our pricing based on the audience that we have. But at the same time, you don't want to, stick yourself into a new bracket that you previously never in. So it's a very kind of fluid environment. I think we are taking it month by month as we kind of go along.
Do you think, I mean, you and I think probably both agree that provinces like Northern Cape, Limpopo, and what's known as the Wild Coast, those areas have traditionally been undervisited both by international and domestic tourists. Have they begun to do a bit better in the context of COVID, or are they still struggling?
No, actually, they're doing quite well. And I'll tell you why. One of the things that I think the pandemic has really changed in terms of consumer behavior is the need to be outdoors. They need to
Yeah.
be in open, wide spaces. They need to be almost in a cluster, in a group or a bubble of people that you have. And, these provinces offer that, which is space. What is struggling, however, is the inner city hotels, where typically, get one big establishment where you're all kind of crammed up and all lined up for breakfast, as it were. And those are struggling a bit. So it's amazing what the preferences of the consumer have done in terms of just changing what now becomes a bit more popular, as it were. The suddenly now the rural areas are places that people want to go to as well. Villages, the townships, and the small towns are really quite popular at the moment.
I think that replicates the global experience. I'm hearing that from destinations around the world, as you would expect in the context of a pandemic.
However, though, I mean, I must stress that, it also has a potential spill-off, as it were, because suddenly now you've got huge numbers going to rural side and small villages. The infrastructure of those places are also now starting to come under pressure,
Yeah.
and I'm talking about water, electricity, and even sewage and everything else from that perspective. So it just shows the importance of local government to be able to play a role in making sure that they can provide the anchor, as it were, in order for those numbers coming in to be catered for.
I mean, I think it's a truism that national departments don't actually manage tourism in destinations. Effectively, it's managed at the local level, either by the national park or by the local municipality. But turning to the responsible tourism agenda in South Africa, has the pandemic set it back or has it reignited it? How do you see the future of responsible tourism as we come out of COVID?
Oh wow, it's absolutely reignited. And again, when we talk of recovery, this quiet period has given all destinations an opportunity to really dig in detail into all those areas that they were either kind of shelving down or kicking down the road to say, address them right now, right? The important factor here is that if destinations don't take the lead, right, you will start to see people not visiting your destinations. The power lies in the consumer, and the consumer is making active choices right now to saying, I want to travel responsibly. I want to go to those places actually that observe issues around sustainability, issues around inclusivity, issues around basically around the green economy and everything else there. It's going to become a competitive advantage. And I think it is in destinations' hand to make sure that they organize themselves around to make sure that they use this competitive advantage that is there.
Well, it's always seemed to me that one of South Africa's big competitive advantages in a world where people want travel experiences is the very diversity of the country, both in terms of its natural heritage, very obviously, but in terms of its cultural heritage. And I often think of Constitution Hill as a place which simply doesn't get enough visitors in the same way that District 6 doesn't. And yet elsewhere in the world, these would be top 10 attractions.
Yeah. And there lies in terms of recalibrating how we showcase South Africa to the world. And we've always historically led with the beach and the safari essentially. And we are leaving out the human element. We're leaving out our story as a country. We're leaving out what makes us to become who we are. And research that we're doing all the time when we prod a lot of travelers into South Africa and around the world, what are they looking for? It's more than just taking a click and just kind of sitting and getting a tag. They want to immerse themselves in the local culture. They want to immerse themselves in food, in art, in the entire kind of setup there. And I think that then starts to say, then we need to start to open up this country and showcase and highlight, or rather shine the spotlight in certain what I call the hidden gems that we've always been there, but now suddenly are going to become quite the champions and heroes in terms of how we recover the sector.
I think it's very clear that the new trend towards the experience requires human contact. This will please you, as I'm sure this will please you as it did me. But when I was at WTM in 2019, I was taken to a local restaurant in one of the townships, and while I was there, a young couple turned up in a taxi, a bush taxi, and booked themselves in for a meal in the restaurant. I just thought, what a transformation in the 25 years I've been coming to South Africa. It's moved completely from a place where people went in only really with an operator to one now where they just book it over the internet and turn up for a meal. And they had a great time, as I did. I mean, it was a fantastic experience. And more people want that, and South Africa can offer it. Do you think South Africa will move quickly in that direction, though?
Look, it's part of our story as a country and evolution as a young democracy, where we literally 25, 26 years into democracy, where inclusion is becoming central to, our offering. And whilst previously, we probably were very ashamed of certain parts of the country and we just kind of created this kind of line, only see the good stuff and everything else. And what we are doing now is to say, let's open it up, what's in all, the tourism must benefit everybody. We all have a story to tell. We all have a food, fashion, and culture. And how does that all come together in the melting pot? And the key thing about inclusion, it does not come at the cost of excluding. So we're adding on, we've got so much headroom as a country that we can still double our numbers in terms of international travel and still not be congested or have over tourism issues. And I think that way lies in the opportunity. And it is in this re-education that we're doing to everyone in South Africa to say that each and every single one of us plays a role within tourism, whether we're directly involved or not, but we all play, a role in tourism. And then when tourism does well, we all do well, essentially. The one thing, though, that is highlighted is that when tourism stops, like it's done right now in the pandemic, suddenly everyone realizes that they're in tourism.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, so suddenly now the impetus has kind of changed a bit. The banks are worried, geez, we're not selling Forex as an example, the telephone companies are not having people roaming on their networks, suddenly the shopping malls are not filled with people who are actually buying. And that in itself then just brings about a new appreciation. So as we come out of this, these are just some of the things we really want to put out there, that it's in the country's interest, it's in everyone's business to make sure when tourism does well, we all do well.
Yeah. And those visits, I mean, those opportunities to engage with local people and the crafters and so on, and the local restaurants, that's all added value for the South African economy and for the livelihoods of those people.
Absolutely. And again, what's important here is to have a consistent flow through of people and numbers going through, the different areas like curios, etc. But also the inclusion part is important. I keep on humping on this inclusion part that, when you've got a tour, as an example, right? That bus driver has power to decide where it stops, which restaurant it stops in, which curio shop it stops in, etc., etc. And at times you may find that some have been favored more than others.
Yeah.
Now what you want to do is to bring that inclusivity, give the consumer a choice. And that's ultimately, right? Stop the bus in the middle and let the tourist decide what tickles their fancy or not, as opposed to kind of going down through a very narrow kind of channel.
Sisa, let's hope that the international tourists begin to flow again. I think it's going to be more difficult than you and I hope it will be. There will be challenges coming down the line. But thanks very much indeed for making time for me this morning. Real pleasure to speak to you, as it always is. Thank you.